This is the PKF Texas Entrepreneur's Playbook. I'm Jen Lemanski, and I'm back once again with Frank Landreneau, one of our approachable advisors and the leader of our international tax practice. Frank, welcome back to the Playbook.
Thanks for having me again.
In our last few videos, we talked about, different elections people can make, and you talked about some, entity classification elections. What are those and what should people consider? And I know we talked about modeling as well, and how does that play into all the things?
It's a really good tool because the entity classification election brought clarity to how you'd be treated for U.S. tax purposes, whether you'd be taxed as a corporation or something other than a corporation. Mm-hmm. It's been around for quite a while, since 1997.
Okay.
And so it's also a very useful tool in international planning. And it kind of plays into another tool we can use to help individual owners, which is really who owns middle market businesses, mm-hmm. either through pass-through entities like partnerships, S corporations that have foreign operations, mm-hmm. that previously the tax reform may have structured themselves in the form of a controlled foreign corporation, mm-hmm. and now they want to do something different because now they have the GILTI income pact, which we talked about in the previous segments. One of the things we can do, although it comes at a tax cost, is to make an election to treat the corporation as a disregarded entity.
Okay.
And in that way, you can avoid some of the nasty aspects of GILTI. You're not denied the foreign tax credit, for example. You can incur losses and have those deducted mm-hmm. against U.S. source income for U.S. tax purposes. And it creates a lot of different opportunities. The problem is that historically, for foreign corporations that are actually formed by a U.S. company as opposed to, let's say, one mm-hmm. that they purchased as an
Sure.
acquisition, have a relatively low tax basis. And over time, as they've grown the business, the value has gone mm-hmm. up in value. And so if you make a check-the-box election to treat the entity as a foreign branch as opposed to a corporation, mm-hmm. then you could incur a pretty high long-term capital gains tax. And
Sure.
So that could prevent someone from doing this kind of planning. But sometimes, particularly during economically depressed periods, you can kind of take a look at it, especially if you have other tax attributes mm-hmm. that are offsetting, like net operating loss carry forwards. You can actually offset the cost. So you really kind of have to go through different scenarios to see what might be the right thing for you.
Mm-hmm. And what happens if in those scenarios the tax cost is just too high? What do you do then?
Yeah, then we're probably looking to go back to some of the options we've talked about in earlier mm-hmm. segments, like making the GILTI high tax exception mm-hmm. election if that's appropriate,
Sure.
depending on what the results are, or the 962 election could be beneficial depending on what jurisdictions you're operating in. But one thing you could actually do is just kind of let the existing company bleed out. In other words, form a new entity that is a disregarded entity mm-hmm. for U.S. tax purposes, and just let the old company just unwind and mm-hmm. let the business, die off.
Yeah.
And let the new business would be startup.
Sure.
And have that in the new structure and so forth. Now,
mm-hmm.
realizing I know that's not always easy, especially if you have contracts and mm-hmm. licenses and some other commercial things that may not be easily transferable from one entity to the next. That could be difficult, mm-hmm. but that's always another option to do. It's kind of like starting over in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, kind of get that fresh slate, see what makes sense, and again, I think that modeling comes in, right, to see what all your different options are.
Absolutely, you got to really look at each one and say, okay, what is the best option for you? And of course, timing also
Sure.
makes a difference. A lot of times, people are looking to sell their business.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your time horizon to what is your exit strategy? You have one. And
is it 2 years from now or is it 10 years from now? Because that'll play a big factor into it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll get you back to talk a little bit more about that. Sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you.
This has been another Thought Leader production brought to you by PKF Texas, the Entrepreneur's Playbook. For more information about this and other topics, visit pkftexas.com/insights. Tune in next week for another chapter.